Thanks for the intro, Baruz. And thanks for the good happenstance from the program organizers. Back in my talk up against Pankaj, that was a good treat. Cool. So my name's Ryan Ricks. I'm the technical lead on the data rights protocol. And at CR, we've been developing, at Consumer Reports, excuse me, we've been developing a technical standard for exchanging data rights requests. For over 80 years, Consumer Reports has been advocating for consumers, providing independent research, and doing reviews of consumer products and services. The Consumer Reports Innovation Lab has been researching consumer data rights since 2020 and is now building tools to empower consumers. I'm going to start by briefly recapping Consumer Reports' research on data rights and where it's led us to today. So in 2020, we asked consumers to submit do not sell requests to 234 data brokers in the California Attorney General's Data Broker Registry. Half of the consumers left the study dissatisfied. Consumers could not find do not sell links on nearly half of the sites in the registry, whether they were there or not. One of them was added to a marketing list in violation of the California Consumer Privacy Act, and one was required to set up an account to opt out of data processing, which is also a violation of the California Consumer Privacy Act. We learned through this research that one-off manual opt-out requests do not really give meaningful protections to consumers. So, while a consumer may be able to make a small amount of targeted data requests, being able to opt out from the data ecosystem or particular classes of data brokers or businesses that they don't agree with is anywhere from time-consuming to impossible in practice. As an example, I don't link to it here, but one of the other members of the Innovation Lab, Yael Grauer, publishes a list on GitHub of sort of the most common or the highest profile data brokers to opt out of. And just by looking through this list, it's called the big ass data broker opt-out list, Bad Bool. If you look this up, you'll understand that for the average consumer and even for the privacy conscious individual like us, it's just not feasible, right? And so an interesting thing that we've discovered, or rather, that we've been exploring over the last couple of years is this idea of an authorized agent. So the California Consumer Privacy Act is kind of unique in that it allows consumers to authorize other people to submit CCPA data requests on their behalf. The authorized agent provision allows consumers to entrust organizations like Consumer Reports, for example, to exercise rights on their behalf and to do so in a much sort of wider fashion than they would be able to do on their own. Other state privacy rules have forms of authorized agent provisions, but California is unique in that it allows for any of the core data rights to be delegated and not just a subset like opt-out requests. And so as a result, much of our focus on research and advocacy has been specifically around the California Consumer Privacy Act. But anybody else wants to make good data requests or data legislation, we'd love to see it. So after asking consumers to make these requests on their own, CR wanted to test this authorized agent provision. And basically, through kind of a legal power of attorney process, Consumer Reports became the authorized agent for these consumers and submitted opt-out requests on their behalf. What we found was that many of the companies were unprepared to handle data requests from agents. And ultimately, we found that 14% of the companies did not provide confirmation of processing the requests. One of the companies asked for data that Consumer Reports had not and would not collect from consumers because we didn't want to be responsible for securely holding this sensitive data. And ultimately, only a bit more than half were able to confirm to Consumer Reports that the opt-out process was successful at the end. And then last year, Consumer Reports used that authorized agent provision again in order to make data subject access requests on behalf of consumers. In this research, we were explicit that with companies that the results of data rights requests should be sent directly to the consumers. And many businesses had to adapt their compliance workflows to ensure this, right? At the end of the day, Consumer Reports doesn't want to be responsible for securely holding this sort of sensitive consumer data, and we wanted to make sure that that is how this worked in practice. Unfortunately, as a result, It led to consumers kind of being confused about what was in the data rights requests, or oftentimes, what wasn't in the data rights requests. And at the end of the day, they didn't really have a lot of recourse to resolve that. So all of that is to say that even though we didn't have access to the data packets, the information about the processing of the requests themselves could over time provide valuable statistical information to consumers, to regulators, even to other businesses or the business industry as a whole, how data rights requests work in practice. Let's see here. So the end result of this research was, by the end, essentially half of the businesses weren't really interested in communicating with consumer reports about the results of these data rights requests, though. So in the vast majority of the cases, we actually didn't have the ability to collect metadata that would be useful to consumers in that regard. So throughout all of the research that we've done over these years, consumer reports learned that consumers want a consistent and transparent interface, and that to provide that transparency, metadata about the requests need to be tracked over time. So consumer reports began to develop a mobile app called Permission Slip to enable this. Now, if we look at the ecosystem of existing agents, there's kind of two major ways to do it right now. Applications can either hook up to your mailbox and kind of look at what businesses you've done email transactions with, or they've sent you marketing emails, and basically they'll send these automated opt-out requests through your mailbox. And then there's another way, which is kind of more in line with the research that we've done, where basically you would onboard into consumer reports, authorize consumer reports to send the requests on your behalf, and then there's a back-of-house process that is basically three people submitting spreadsheets in a trench coat, right? Wrapped in a shiny little mobile app. And so, obviously, judging by how I've presented that, we've gone with the latter route. And as a result, we've started basically building relationships with data and privacy teams at various companies that are represented in the Permission Slip app. We're kind of in a unique position to do this because of how trusted of a brand Consumer Reports is, both for consumers and for businesses, which is a nice sort of leg up to let us experiment with these things. So we entered private beta earlier this year. We scaled up to over 10,000 users and hundreds of thousands of opt-out and deletion requests during our pre-launch testing. But we're in a point now where we have to wonder, how do we scale this up to something that many more users, perhaps even the whole Consumer Reports subscriber base could take advantage of? And we believe that automation and standardization of these requests is a key component, and that led to the birth of the data rights protocol. So, to quickly reiterate, Consumer Reports learned through applied research that consumers want to exercise their data rights, but they're disempowered by technical and procedural issues. We learned that businesses have little technical foundation to trust the fidelity of data access requests or any agent requests, which forced many of them to process them by hand or direct consumers to submit the requests themselves. And we learned that through all of this process, excuse me, my speaker notes aren't very good here. We learned that businesses have little technical foundation to trust these requests. We learned that consumers want to be able to make these requests. And we learned that businesses providing these unique or bespoke processes prevents consumers from making these requests. And so we believe that with the right affordances, this authorized agent provision can serve as like a trustworthy intermediary between consumers and businesses without fully disintermediating the relationship between the consumer and the business. And so we've built a standardized workflow to streamline and interchange these data rights requests, So over the last 2 years, we developed the data rights protocol as a holistic system across 3 dimensions. We have a technical protocol that defines the nuts and bolts of request interchange, and this can be laid on top of existing privacy compliance systems. We have a lightweight framework of operating rules that ensures consumers' data and businesses' processes can be protected from abuse. And we encapsulate all of that in a participatory network of businesses that represent the entire ecosystem of a data rights request. And this ensures that we're building a system that actually works in practice. And so we're going to dive really quickly into the technical bits. The nuts and bolts of the data rights protocol are really simple. We've built a request processing schema and sort of a state machine that captures the flow of data rights requests. This flow is simple while still being flexible enough to allow for in-house identity verification if businesses want to do this, and as well as handling sort of weird states of data rights requests, processing delays, that sort of stuff. Here's a representation, we'll call it, of that state machine diagram. And this is embedded in the technical specification, which I'll link to at the end of the presentation if you'd like to take a closer look. So the DRP is implemented with fairly boring technology. It's a set of 5 HTTPS endpoints. The DRP data rights requests contain information about the regulatory environment the user is submitting the request from, what right they wish to exercise, and a standard encoding of the consumer's identity. Here you can see our consumer Jane Doe is making a CCPA opt-out request. This is all bundled up, signed, and encoded in a way that can be safely transferred over the internet. Messages are signed using a public domain encryption API called libsodium to prove agent identity. Libsodium has implementations in many programming languages and is specifically designed to avoid cryptographic disasters from misuse or misapplication or even misimplementation, right? And so while the DRP requests are sent over the open internet using HTTPS, the participants in the network itself is bounded by participation in a root of trust. The root of trust is really simple. It's 2 JSON documents. One of them contains information about the authorized agents which implement the DRP. This provides businesses with contact information and the cryptographic material required to validate the authenticity of the messages. And another contains information about all of the businesses which have elected to take in DRP data requests. And this allows agents to discover very quickly which businesses they can submit these requests to, as opposed to submitting a bunch of spreadsheets via email or contacting the DPO or what have you. So, as I said moments ago, the DRP is more than just a technical specification. The technical bits of it almost aren't interesting. The self-governance of this network by its participants and by the whole ecosystem of a data rights request is kind of the secret sauce here. And it's an important part of building a system that we believe works in practice. So we have basically, we've developed a lightweight common agreement which outlines acceptable behavior for agents, companies, and the privacy compliance tooling providers that they contract with. Agents and businesses provide each other transparent documentation of data handling practices, whether that's privacy policies, or in the case of agents, they also provide information about the identity verification steps that they go through, basically to give businesses a reason to trust that the agent is making, that they're validating the identity and they're not just passing along whatever gets typed into a web form. And ultimately, we believe that for a lot of cases, for a lot of businesses, that statement by the agent might be enough to basically be able to fully automate these requests, right? You onboard onto an authorized agent app, you validate your identity once, and then that validated identity gets transmitted to these businesses, and they're able to fulfill these data rights requests. And as I mentioned earlier, for businesses that aren't interested or don't just want to trust these things or have their own account management systems, we also provide for handling that within the protocol, sort of an in-band validation stage. So all of that is kind of wrapped up in a lightweight rulemaking organization, and this ensures that everyone involved can implement the spec. We have a common agreement on what the spec looks like, and that the whole ecosystem can evolve over time to serve new requirements, meet new use cases, et cetera. Currently, the rulemaking of the group is sort of a one organization and one vote gets one vote model, but we're looking at sort of other models that balance sort of the different classes of actors within the ecosystem. So say the majority of authorized agents, the majority of businesses, and the majority of the privacy compliance tooling providers all have to agree, as opposed to like a simple majority or a consensus model. So the DRP provides implementation guides, open source reference implementations that will help onboard new implementers. And the reference implementation also includes a test suite to basically help with interoperability and conformance testing. And finally, the service directories are managed through a lightweight process using GitHub's access control features and published via GitHub Actions. So once a business is onboarded onto the sort of DRP network, one of their technical people is basically added to a GitHub repo. They can manage their entries inside of the directory, and those will publish automatically. So to swing all the way back around, by acting as intermediaries, authorized agents and privacy compliance technology providers can reduce the complexity of accessing and acting on important data rights. Here you can basically see kind of how we're thinking about how this works in practice, right? For many companies, and it might be kind of different here because we're all privacy engineers, but for many companies, maybe even the vast majority, they contract these services out, right? They talk to a OneTrust, they talk to an Ethica, they talk to a Transcend, et cetera, who basically provides all of these services, whether it's workflow management, whether it's sort of receiving the inbound requests, et cetera. And so we basically partnered all throughout this ecosystem to build a thing that works and can be easily implemented by businesses. And so with all of this, we believe that consumers can stop filling out dozens of bespoke forms, following up with customer service representatives who may not be well trained in handling these data rights requests. And businesses can stop fielding hundreds of form-filled support emails and training those same customer support representatives to safely handle consumer identity material and their personal data. Let's see here. While some businesses may believe that the most effective way to handle data rights is to defer or redirect or disregard the requests, we believe that innovative engineering can build cost-effective solutions and deliver value to and build trust with consumers. That shouldn't be a crazy statement in this room, but you never know. And like I said, we're working with others on this stream. It's not just consumer reports. So you can sort of see on the left, we have sort of all of the agent applications which are currently in the DRP consortium. In the middle, you can see privacy compliance tooling providers that are involved with us, whether they're active in implementing it or whether they're sort of involved in the development or kind of taking a wait and see approach to see where the DRP ends up. And then on the right is the businesses that are currently involved. One of them is obviously Consumer Reports. We wouldn't be, we wouldn't be doing this if we couldn't handle the data rights requests ourselves. But yeah, the DRP, it's being evaluated, steered, implemented by some of the largest privacy compliance tooling providers. And we believe that this gives consumers a leg up and it gives businesses a good opportunity to come on board. We envision a world where consumers have access to powerful data management tools which can validate the identity of the consumer and make attestations to businesses on behalf of those consumers. And we envision a world where businesses can click a single button in their privacy compliance suite to transparently enable these requests and stop spending precious paralegal time validating pictures of people's driver's licenses. All that said, let's make data rights real. If you're a privacy engineer working for a company with consumer data, consider implementing the DRP. If you're a privacy engineer who wants to work on things like this in an individual contributor capacity, Consumer Reports Innovation Lab is hiring. We're also working on IoT security, VPN security, and other advocacy and research in data rights and other consumer-oriented research. For more information, you can visit datarightsprotocol.org. We launched a new website like 30 minutes ago. It's very exciting. And yeah, find the full specification on GitHub. It's on the Consumer Reports Innovation Lab GitHub organization. And you can also find me or email me or Slack me afterwards. Thank you very much.